Although we're still a few months from the race season and the weather is still pretty dark and miserable at the moment, you might actually want to start thinking about stepping up your training ready for some of the events coming up at the early part of this year. Now, if you're doing a spring marathon like London, Manchester, Brighton, Llanelli, and so on, anything like that, you should really be well into your training by now. I mean, we've got around about 3 months to go and it's starting to get very real. Now, what I'm going to tell you now also applies to races a little later, sort of May to July time. And if your key events are August to October, then keep this in the back of your mind because this is going to become really relevant around about April. Now, firstly, I want to stress that this applies to 10km and half marathon races as well as marathon running. But I'm going to stick with the marathon running because of the time of year and with the spring marathons coming. So let's talk a little bit about the training. At this point, no matter what distance of race you're doing, the bulk of your training should still be long and steady. Now, by this I mean anything from sort of 60 minutes up to about 3.5 hours. The pace should be really slow, almost to the point of feeling like you're not really getting anywhere. Now, I personally find that around 1.5 to 2 minutes per mile slower than target pace is about right. So, if you're aiming for a 4-hour marathon, your target pace is going to be around about the 9-minute 10-second per mile area, which means your training runs and your long slow runs need to be around about 11 minutes per mile. Now, this will probably feel stupidly slow, but it's really important. It gives your body time to adapt to running for a long period of time and helps to make you more efficient. Now, you'll know you're doing it right if you feel as if you're hardly trying. If your breathing starts to increase at any point, then you need to ease back. Now, I always suggest that you run at an intensity where you could keep a comfortable conversation with someone without having to snatch breaths between words, kind of like I'm speaking now. Now, I remember when I started running like this, it would absolutely kill me to go that slow. Now, I used to go off a heart rate monitor and would aim to stay below sort of 75 to 80% of my maximum. Now, don't worry too much if you don't use a heart rate monitor. It tended to work out to be about 90 seconds per mile slower than my target pace. But the point is, I felt like I wasn't actually going anywhere and that I was wasting my time. It even meant I had to walk uphill just to keep my heart rate down. The funny thing is that over a period of time, you'll notice a few really big changes. Firstly, like I said, you'll find that initially you have to start by walking uphill just to keep the intensity at that conversational level. Then after a few weeks you'll find that you can jog quietly most of the way up a hill. Then finally you'll be able to jog the whole way up a hill. Then you'll be able to go a little bit quicker, then you'll be able to go a little quicker until you're pretty much running the entire hill without ever getting above that conversational level. Now, like I say, you'll find it horrible initially and it does take a couple of months to get it to work. But it is well worth it because you'll find that you suddenly have gears as a runner. You'll have a comfortable pace, but you'll also have that pace where you can run harder and faster for very little extra effort, and then another level where you can really go for it again. Now, this is part of how you'll build endurance to be able to run a marathon at your desired pace. Now, if you're running 3 times a week, then make sure at least 2 of your runs are like this, especially your longer run. And if you run 4 times a week, then I'd aim for at least 3 of these types of run, including your longer run. And either way, if you're new to this, then just stick with this kind of running and don't worry too much about anything else. This is the most important part. If, however, you've got a bit more experience and you want to try in a time that you can be proud of, then there's another type of training session you can definitely try. Now, you'll hear all sorts of different types of sessions. You'll hear interval running, tempo running. I've heard Kenyan hills mentioned recently. And basically, they're all trying to achieve the same thing. They get you to run at an intensity that is above your comfortable level and nearer to your target pace. So, for starters, you'll need around about 45 to 90 minutes for this type of session, depending on your ability. And make sure you run for 10 to 15 minutes first to warm up. You'll then move on to the main part of the session, which involves running faster than you have been. Now, a tempo run is one where you might go out and run anything from sort of 20 to 60 minutes. And you'd run a bit harder than you have been. And by harder, I mean that you will be running at a level where you will find it more difficult to keep a conversation, or about 85% if you're using a heart rate monitor. Now this is fine, but personally I find it more effective to break your tempo run down into 15-minute segments. So essentially you've got a 15-minute block where you put in your tempo effort and your recovery before you start again. Now if you've never done this type of session, I would start by, an example would be running for 3 minutes at your sort of tempo pace and then recovering at your conversational pace for the rest of that 15 minutes. So in this case 12. Then repeat it. Depending on how much time you have, you could do this up to 4 times. Though, if you're new to running, then I'd try to keep it to 3. Now, if you're more experienced, then you could do 5 to 10 minutes, taking the rest of the 15 to recover. Your aim is simply to increase how long you're running for, and thus reduce the recovery time. Now, this could take a few months, but that's fine, okay? You need to be careful with this type of session, because you're putting a lot of extra demands on your body, so taking your time is sensible. So, as an example, if you're going to go out and run at tempo for 5 minutes, you're going to recover for 10 minutes. And you're going to do this 3 times, which is a 45-minute session. Add to this your 15-minute warm-up and about 10 minutes to cool down. You're just over the hour. Now, the following week, you could aim to do 6 minutes of running and then recover for 9. And then do that 3 times. And then the following week, you can run for 7 minutes and recover for 8. All the time keeping within that 15-minute block. Now on the 4th week, it's a really good idea to back off a little. So go back to what you did in week 1, which in this case was 5 minutes on and 10 minutes off. Your body will need the time to recover, and an easier week really does this, and it's important to take one every 4th week. When you get back to week 5, do the last session that you did before your recovery week. So 7 minutes running and 8 minutes of recovering. And build that up to 8 minutes the next week and then 9 minutes the week after, before going back to doing 7 minutes in your recovery week. Now carry on in this fashion until you get to 14 minutes. Once you get to 14 minutes, I recommend that you go back to 10 minutes with 5 minutes recovery and go through this 4 times. Now, this might sound really confusing, but you'll soon get your head around it. It will also, more than likely, be really hard when you first do this. That'll be because you're not used to it. And after a couple of weeks, you'll start to get better at it, but please remember to ease back every 4th week. Now, I hope you found this useful. The biggest mistake marathon runners make, especially when they're new to it or training for very long events, is that they go too hard too early without building up the endurance properly. Now, if you can avoid that mistake, it will make your race day that much better for you. Good luck with it.